Could you tell us a little bit about that first launch and maybe what are some of the earliest lessons you learned from it?
The very first one. So I wrote a book, like I'm saying that loosely, okay? Like loosely. We still get messages to this day about spelling, but whatever. I digress. Okay, guys. That's because in the thing, it was like the guru thing, like the position. You called it something. Doesn't matter. And one of that was publish. You have to publish. You have to publish. I had done some limited publishing. I had a little blog, and then Jeff was like, "Just put all your blogs or chapters." Not, he didn't just say that to me like that, but essentially that was the message. Message received, boy. So we did it, and so here I was with a book. It was just like those rings, the old ring binder things, like that you slap together at Staples. Don't care, and that was my first one because by this time I had already started building a list, just doing what he said. I just did what they said because I did not know anything. So I guess that was okay because I didn't have any bias towards that. Like I just was like, I'm doing what they say. And so I started like social media and just things that I learned on social media, and then slowly getting the audience. And I was nervous. So my first offer was my book, because we told the story. That was the launch, right? But my book, and then like 4 coaching calls, like old school. I know this, Jeff says old school, but the web director, the little flower thing we had to call in, back in the day. So it was $40. It was $40 and I made $2,000. And I nearly pooped my pants. So I was so happy.
I can imagine, right? So that exceeded the expectations you had going in a bit, I guess.
Well, that's because I now knew I never had to be a representative for any brand, because you can't use phrases like "poop your pants," So that's right. But that's what happened. So 2000, it was incredible. It was amazing, and there's lots of steps up to there. But it was just my mindset was like, I'm doing this, and I don't care if I fall. Like I could say, okay, I tried, right? Because that what if irks me a little bit.
Like one of the things I heard in there was just the determination where you said to yourself, you are launching, you joined this. It was a big leap to join Product Launch Formula, to invest, but I am launching. There's no other way. I am launching. What was that like when you that first launch and you made $2,000?
I got work to do. So it was like, let's do it. But don't forget, you created a community, right? So I was watching other people launch. So now I was seeing and interacting with other members who were having $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 launches. And then that became a 6-figure launch was my goal. But you normalized it. So now it wasn't like if 2000 was this big feat, or, if that would have been amazing. But one of the early lessons, Chris, sorry, I just remembered, was that it's not just about this launch. You're literally thinking 5 launches. And well, maybe the first one you're not, but once I get it. And then you're thinking way down the line. So even still to this day, I could see version 10 in my head, which is frustrating sometimes because you have to, go with the flow sometimes to get there. Remember, Jeff, you did that video with the golf, and your goal is not
Right.
see that kind of thing, right? That's what's up. So the early lesson, dude, is just grin and bear it. And the price of looking foolish is, like I heard it somewhere, is the price to entry to success. There was people in the PLF community that didn't do very well, but then they would be corrected and then they would do. So it was about following the formula and a system. And one of the big things that Jeff said that really got me was the launch, like the parachute. So if you miss some steps, that's okay, because there was like some fail safes, some stop gaps that could slow you down. So I didn't feel like that I had to get everything right. And because as long as I hit these main narratives and that my offer was awesome, and that's kind of how we did it at the beginning. But I was excited, and now it was like, okay, now things make more sense. And then I just eventually had launch seasons, and I would just dive back into PLF because it was like a movie you watched over again or a book you read again, and there was things that made more and more sense. And so sometimes I copied things. I didn't know what they were for, like case studies, like test. I just didn't, really know, or some things I couldn't do because I just didn't understand it. But that's okay. I did what I could, and it grew from there.
Jeff Walker, but could you talk a little bit about what that parachute thing he was just talking about is, or how you explain that? Like, because I think, one, that sounds really interesting, and you just referenced it quickly. We kind of flew over. What are you talking about there? What was that launch parachute thing?
It's this idea that, like with a launch, it's not, you're never dependent on one single piece of the launch, whether it's a piece of pre-launch content, whether it's a sales message, whether it's an email. That the whole thing is a sequence, and there are multiple steps, and you're never going to get everything perfect in a launch. At least I have not yet, and I've done dozens of them. And the idea is that it's like the opposite of a Super Bowl commercial. With a Super Bowl commercial, you pay the contract, you book that time, then you go off and you brainstorm ideas, then you come up with a commercial, and then sometime during the Super Bowl, that commercial is going to get played, and it's either going to sink or swim, depending on the creative, depending on the timing, depending on the quality of the game, depending on all kinds of things. But it's just a one-shot deal. It's either going to work or it doesn't. But a launch is it's more robust in that there are multiple messages, and you don't have to be perfect. You can make mistakes, you can miss pieces, because it's such a redundant process.
But you're the example of it too, right? Like, I mean, how many, let me ask you this, Jeff Noble. I have to keep saying your last names because I'm talking to two Jeffs here, right? But I'm curious, like, when did you start to feel the like you really got this launch thing down, and it was like your process, like, okay, I've got this parachute for the first few, I'm kind of figuring it out, and yes, the results exceeded my expectations. But when did you really start to feel like, oh man, I think I'm a launcher, I can do this? There's
two parts. The first answer is I still don't. Like, that's the beauty of it. You know why a lot more. And the one thing is you get along the launch game is like adjustments. You could make more adjustments, because I used to just plow right through. But now with feedback, I know where we can kind of take pieces in, put pieces out. And as long as we're not reinventing the wheel at all, the narrative of the story might have to change. But that's sort of like how you evolve with a launch. I find as soon as you think you know, man, you will get slapped in the face, like, because you'll overlook something. So my mindset is like, this matters. This means something. Even maybe financially it doesn't at that juncture, like, you're adding to your company's overall, and it's not literally so you could put groceries on the table this time, not like the time where like the tax man came and then like they had nothing, but I launched that Friday, so thank goodness. Anyways, tax guy. But that in essence is I don't, which is why I still get coaching and still have a community. But I feel, yes, do I have a handle? I know a lot more of the why. Does that make sense? What's going on? Like, I'm careful with my audience, and I'll be careful with this one too, about like expectations, because you still got to work, dude. You still got to want it. And there are days where you're going to say, what the F? But with that being said, you have a community to jump into. I just use that, right? Like, these people are doing it. How are they doing it? Well, the benefit of PLF is like, you don't have to reverse engineer. They tell you, this is how we do it. And that would drive me crazy when people would try and change it, or, go out. Anyway, that's just maybe my OCD thing. But yeah, that's my answer, dude. You don't, but you do know more of the why, and thus launch, parachute, launch. I don't know if Jeff, you still talk about the launch echo, because that has certainly grabbed me. That shot me like I was gone. Like I was in the stratosphere before I even knew it from launch, because that's what happened. That's why I only ended up for a long time launching once a year, because once my the first launch, I was speaking so much. I was just having such a great time traveling all around the world, right? So
what is a launch echo? Can you talk about that, Jeff, just for a second?
Yeah, so launch echo is just this idea that when you follow this process and you put together a great launch, you put together great pre-launch content, you deliver value, and then you have this open cart process, that in addition to the sales, you will get all kinds of other things like list building, like greater stature and positioning in your market, and you'll get invited. You'll have people showing up that want to partner with you in various ways, and you'll get asked to speak on podcasts. You might get asked to speak on stages. You don't have to do any of this, but the reality is all of a sudden you become a very well-known person in your market by following this process.
I wanted to do the speaking. Like, that's what I wanted to do when I was a young boy. I just didn't. I remember talking to a speaking coach. She said, "What's your niche?" I didn't know. I was like, I want to do what Tony Robbins does. I just didn't know. And so now I knew. And that, for me, the launch echo, it doesn't have to be just speaking. It's all parts of your life. It's just when you put yourself out there, when you deliver the goods, when you deliver good value and good content, like the winds of abundance take you. Because if you're solving problems and you're doing it in a way with humanity and respect and dignity, while still being serious and providing a place where people can get the information. Like, people get caught up in being an expert or not being able to be seen as being an expert. And I remind your audience, I have high school. That's it. And to be, considered one of those folks on the level with the other people. When I keynote, it's like doctors or, those athletes, Olympic athlete, on the bill. And then there's Jeff, right? There's, is because when you know your stuff and it works and it's based in science and you can back up your claims and it helps, like it literally, here's a pain point. Oh, I have an answer for that and a formula and a system and a way to do that. Here you go. And then it happens. Oh man, that's you just get carried, right? And then one of my strengths just happens to be on stage, where it's my favorite thing to do too. And you can look them in the eyes, right? So all of that. And then this is a worldwide disability. If you want to talk about business, right? If I think about growth, so there's not a lot of people in my space. And the reason for that is because parents can smell bullshit a mile away. Sorry about that, but they can. They have been told, my parents have been told everything and promised everything, and none of it's worked. And so my stuff's working. So do they give up about the letters behind my name when a lot of those folks have been giving nothing but the wrong information and making my parents feel small and belittled? And so I said, hey, what about my positioning is where you are the expert on your kid, and I'm just happens to be the guy who's sitting up in the press box, right, to use that sports analogy, and watch you play. And I've got years of experience, and I'm gonna help you out too. And the only difference between me and you is that I am regulated, and you're not. And so I have access to different parts of my brain than you do, right? So, because you'll get that too. Oh, that's such a good idea. Yeah. It's simple, is because I'm not under a pool. I'm not drowning in a pool of cortisol, right? Of that stress chemical like my parents are. It's something else.
Hey, Launch family, thanks again for listening. Wasn't that a great clip? If you haven't yet, hit subscribe. We have lots of great episodes coming up, and it really helps the channel grow. Plus, if you go to getyoulaunch.com, we have some absolutely free, amazing resources for you and training. I'm going to put it right down here, or you can check out the show notes just down below. And thanks again for listening. We love doing this show, and we are excited to keep growing with you. See you on the next episode.